Today let's talk about the various cytokines and interferons. So first of all, I'll talk about the various important cytokines that helps in the various immunological responses in our body. So cytokines can be divided into four types. The cytokines that are secreted by the macrophages, that are secreted by the T cells, and there are the cytokines that are secreted from the T helper 1 cells, and other cytokines that are secreted from the T helper 2 cells. And also there are some interferons that are categorized as the cytokines. I'll discuss that in a minute. So the various cytokines that are secreted by the macrophages are interleukin 1, interleukin 6, interleukin 8, interleukin 12, and tumor necrosis factor alpha. So these are the various cytokines that are secreted by the macrophages. The other cytokines that are secreted by the T cells are interleukin 2 and interleukin 3. The cytokines that are secreted from the T helper 1 cells are interferon gamma. So interferon gamma can also be categorized as one of the cytokines that is secreted from the T helper 1 cells. And the cytokines that are secreted from the T helper 2 cells are interleukin 4, interleukin 5, and interleukin 10. So these are the various cytokines that are secreted by the various macrophages, T cells, T helper 1 cells, and T helper 2 cells. We will discuss this in detail in this video. First of all, let us talk about various cytokines that are secreted by the macrophages. So as I have already mentioned, the various cytokines that are secreted by the macrophages are interleukin 1, interleukin 6, tumor necrosis factor alpha, interleukin 8, and interleukin 12. Now the function of the interleukin 1 is that after the secretion of the interleukin 1 by the macrophages, it causes fever, acute inflammation, and it also activates the endothelium to express adhesion molecule. It induces the chemokine secretion to recruit WBCs, and it is also called osteoclast activating factor because it activates the osteoclast. The interleukin 6 also causes fever and stimulates production of the acute phase proteins. The tumor necrosis factor alpha activates endothelium and it causes the WBC recruitment, and tumor necrosis factor alpha also causes the vascular leak. The interleukin 8 is the major chemotactic factor for the neutrophils. So whenever there is an infection and from that infected cell there is the secretion of the interleukin 8 because there is the appearance of the macrophages in those infected area, and the macrophages secrete the interleukin 8, thereby recruiting the neutrophil because the interleukin 8 is the chemotactic factor for the neutrophil. The interleukin 12 induces differentiation of the T cell into the T helper 1 cell, and it also activates the natural killer cells. Now let us talk about the various cytokines that are secreted by the T cells. Those are interleukin 2 and interleukin 3. The interleukin 2 stimulates the growth of helper cells, cytotoxic and regulatory T cells, and also the natural killer cells. So if there is no secretion of the interleukin 2, then there will be the no growth of the helper, cytotoxic and regulatory T cells and the natural killer cells. The interleukin 3 supports the growth and differentiation of the bone marrow stem cells, and it functions like the granulocyte macrophage colony stimulating factor. Now let us talk about the cytokine that are secreted from the T helper 1 cells, that is the interferon gamma. So the interferon gamma secreted by the natural killer cell and the T cell in response to the antigen or interleukin 12 from the macrophages. It stimulates the macrophage to kill the phagocytosed pathogen, and it also inhibits the differentiation of the T helper 2 cells. It induces immunoglobulin G isotype switching in the B cells. So the interferon gamma is the only cytokine that is secreted from the T helper 1 cells. Now let us discuss various cytokines that are secreted from T helper 2 cells. Those are interleukin 4, interleukin 5, interleukin 10, and interleukin 13. So the interleukin-4 induces differentiation of the T cells into the T helper 2 cells, and it promotes growth of B cells, and it also enhances class switching to IgE and IgG. Interleukin 5 promotes growth and differentiation of the B cells. Interleukin 5 enhances class switching to IgA. It stimulates growth and differentiation of the eosinophils. Interleukin 10 attenuates inflammatory response. It decreases expression of the MHC class 2 and Th1 cytokines. It inhibits activated macrophages and dendritic cells, and it also secreted by the regulatory T cells. The interleukin 13 promotes IgE production by the B cells. It induces alternative macrophage activation. Now let us discuss about the various interferons. The various interferons that are secreted in our body are interferon alpha, interferon beta, and interferon gamma. The mechanism of those interferons are it interferes with the both RNA and DNA virus. So it interferes with the both RNA and DNA viruses by inhibiting their synthesis. So the cells that are infected with the virus, they synthesizes the interferon. The interferons are also the glycoprotein. So the synthesized interferons acts on the local cells. So after the acting on the local cell, they prime them for the viral defense by down-regulating protein synthesis to resist the potential viral replication and by upregulating MHC expression. So by regulating the MHC expression and resisting the potential virus replication, what happens? This will facilitate the recognition of the infected cell. So after the recognition of the infected cell, the cells that are infected by the various viruses are destroyed in our body. So the interferons also play a major role in activating the anti-tumor immunity. So what are the various clinical uses of the interferons? The various clinical uses of the interferons is in chronic hepatitis B virus infection, Kaposi sarcoma, hairy cell leukemia, condyloma acuminata, renal cell carcinoma, malignant melanoma, multiple sclerosis, and lastly chronic granulomatous disease, CGD, chronic granulomatous disease. So after the using those interferons, you can also use these interferons. So after the using those interferons, there are some adverse effects like flu-like symptom, depression, neutropenia, myopathy, and interferon-induced autoimmunity. So these are the various adverse effects that occurs if we use the interferons in our body externally. So I hope you understood this video. So lastly, I want to summarize all. We discuss about the various cytokines that are secreted in our body. We discussed in detail about the cytokines secreted by the macrophages, and the cytokines secreted by the macrophages are interleukin 1, interleukin 6, interleukin 8, interleukin 12, and tumor necrosis factor alpha. The cytokines that are secreted by the T cells are interleukin 2 and interleukin 3. The cytokines that are secreted by the Th1 cells are the interferon gamma. In the cytokines that are secreted from the T helper 2 cells are interleukin 4, interleukin 5, and interleukin 10. And we also discuss about the interferons, various interferons like interferon alpha, interferon beta, and interferon gamma. We discuss about their mechanism, how they facilitate in the immune response, and various clinical use and their adverse effect. So I hope you understood this topic of cytokines and interferon. Thank you.